Welcome back to the warehouse. We'll just let some people jump on. I'm here with my father.
Yeah, lucky me.
Yeah, lucky you. We've had lots of questions coming in. But if you're just joining, so we've just had the kind of 360 interview thing with you in the warehouse. And if you had any questions, please put them in the comments, whether it's on Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook. They will be sent through to me here, and we'll put them to the old man who's apparently been maturing in the warehouse. The title of this was Anthony Wills Maturing in the Warehouse. Do you think you're at the right balance yet? Ready to be bottled?
No, I think I've got a few years.
Maybe you're a bit overcooked.
I think, well, you would like to think I was, but I think there's quite a few years left in me yet. Not ready for bottling.
Okay, good.
Or putting in a box.
No. Anywho, right, yeah, well, none of the questions relate to that particularly, but so the first question we had in was, are there any particularly interesting casks that you taste more often than others in the warehouse? So I'm guessing different certain cask type that you taste more.
I think that white wine casks are trickier for us to get right in terms of when they're ready, and they have lots of bumps in the road in terms of maturation. And I think that's more to do with the structure of white wine. We tend to use sweet white wine. We haven't filled many dry white wine, and we're going to look at that. But the sweet white wines, I think they just don't lend themselves necessarily for easier sort of just good maturation, just constant sort of maturing over the years, and they just ebb and flow a bit more. So we have to check those a lot more regularly. And I think we've now got used to a lot of the casks we've refilled, like port and Madeira and red wine casks, STR, Shaved Toast and Recharge, where we know how they're performing. So it's really the new casks that we're filling are the ones that we need to keep an eye on more often.
Okay, and what proportion of your casks are second fill? So have been used once by us and then
I think, yes. I mean, I think we tend to, as a distillery, use first fill because we like the big hit of fruit and character that's coming through on those for maybe slightly earlier maturation. And then refill. I think we fill 70% in total into bourbon, and I would say 20% of those are refill. Okay. But we only refill them once. We don't tend to use them as a second refill. I think that's more to do with, our spirit character is fairly sweet and floral, and it doesn't lend itself to take it out for very long-term maturation.
You don't think so? So where do you think the sweet spot is with a fresh fill cask and a refill cask? Where would you say in terms of ages?
Well, I think with bourbons, I think that anything between 10 and 15 years, I think we're now getting to that age. We got nearly 16-year-old whiskey maturing in the cask, in the warehouse. And looking at the profile of those casks, I think anything between 9 years up to 15 years is for me the sweet spot. But I think if anybody enjoys Islay whiskies, then you could argue that you could drink them slightly younger than that, even to maintain that sort of peaty, smoky character, which is going to be submerged by the characteristics coming through the cask if you leave them much longer.
Okay, and going back to the overcooked casks, so there's a question: what do you normally do with overcooked? So overcooked casks. So do you want to explain what you mean by an overcooked cask?
I mean that they've been overkilled by the characteristics from the cask they've been matured in. So they need to be whipped out and put back in a bourbon maybe, or a refill bourbon, or even a second refill bourbon, just to slow the process down and not take it too far over the top where we're not going to want to bottle it. So you can rescue these, and we have had a few of them like Madeira casks that we finished for too long, and we've forgotten they were in the warehouse in the corner, and we've then taken them out and put them into second or third refill bourbon, and that's leave them there for.
So you can recover it.
You can recover it enough to do a bottling, maybe a single cask bottling at some point.
And so, say you have a PX sherry cask which has gone not way too far, but it's gone further than you might like, and it's got really astringent and dry. Do you put that into a refill PX, or do you put it into a different cask?
We put it into a different cask. We put it into a bourbon on the whole, which has maybe been used at least twice before. So it's fairly neutral. in character.
And there's one comment say, nice haircut, Anthony. I don't know who that's from.
I think they're being rude, actually.
Interesting time. So also another question, how much do you enjoy working with your 3 sons?
Well, they're bloody cheeky to me. But fortunately, I don't see them that much. And they're based over in Edinburgh and down in Bristol. George looks after the UK, and Peter and you, James.
Yeah.
Do they know who you are? They know.
I'm James. Yeah,
James.
They know that. They don't know who George is.
So I'm based on Islay, and I think Kathy, my wife, and I decided very early on when we came up with the idea of being a distillery that we needed to be here on site. And I really, it wouldn't be the same if I wasn't here and keeping an eye on everything. And so we're more involved in the production and maturation and cask selection for our fillings.
Yeah. So
and now to answer the question, yeah, it's an
absolute delight.
It's an absolute
yeah,
delight every day. I'm looking forward to it. But no, I'm hugely proud of the fact that they've all joined the company. I didn't set out to start this company and bring my sons into it, but it happened that way. And as we needed more sales and marketing people, Peter was the first, you were second, and George last. So it's great that they're all here, and I can be as rude as I like to them, whereas probably with other people I can't be. Well, they probably say I'm just as rude to them as well.
I think so. Okay, and then when will the Medscal finished casks be available? Or be ready? Sorry, not available, but ready.
Well, they were relatively experimental casks in that we hadn't used these types before, so we were a bit wary of it. We bought a first tranche of casks probably a couple of years ago and filled some of those as finishes latter part of last year. I think the casks, the Medscal casks that we tasted actually, and we've actually released it to Royal Mile Whiskey, or one of them we've had released.
One went to the US as well.
And one's gone, and I think they've worked really well. But as I've always said, I'd like to do full maturation, but it's great to do some of these finishes to see how it works. And the Medscal and tequila have really shone through. And I think because tequila and Medscal are now becoming a very popular spirit around the world, and especially in America, it's something that we want to do more of. And we've now bought a lot more tequila and Medscal casks to fill. And it's the same with the other experimental casks. Once they work well on the first occasion, we like to fill more of them the second time around.
And then there have been a few questions about pomegranate casks.
Who?
Pomegranate casks.
Yeah.
Who? I'm guessing you don't know much about pomegranate casks.
I didn't know they were casks that.
I think they made. Is it Milk and Honey in Israel?
Okay.
Which is a Jim Swan.
Yes, Jim Swan connection, and clearly they're making great strides. I gather there, and Jim obviously had a huge influence on what they did. So it's great to see them doing well. No, we haven't, but if anyone can give us contacts, we'll be delighted to have a go.
Yeah, because I always say that Kilchoman, lends itself to experimentation. Like whatever it is about our spirit, and maybe you can shine some light on that. It just seems to stand up and work well with all sorts of casks.
I have a feeling it's to do with the Islay characteristics that tend to lend themselves to maturing in all different types of casks. I think it doesn't always work as well with Speyside or the less sort of, I'm not saying one-dimensional, but I'm saying without that added dimension of peat and smoke and maritime character. Yeah. And we've been very fortunate because no cask have we filled and thought, God, what are we going to do with that? So that's fantastic, and it allows us to really experiment in a big way with the cask types that we're using.
Was that ever just discussed before you built Kilchoman? Was it ever discussed, I want something that is suited to a certain type of cask?
No, I think when we first started, Jim was very traditional, and when we started, most people were doing finishes in different cask types, but no one was really doing full maturation. And actually, that's still the case. Everybody still talks about our finishes rather than saying they're full maturation. And very few distilleries do full maturation in different cask types apart from bourbon and sherry. And it's nice to be able to do that and showcase our spirit in different forms.
It's harder to do, though, isn't it?
It's much harder to do, and you're not sure how it's going to work. And that's why we predominantly fill into bourbon and sherry, because we know traditionally it's worked for many years and will continue to do so. And bourbon is the cask that we use mainly because of the style and characteristics that shine through from filling into those cask types.
And do we have a Cooper on site?
No, I mean, no distillery now has Coopers. Just really the big distilleries in terms of Diageo and William Grant's and Chivas, they will have cooperages. All these casks that we take in come in whole, and we literally just pull the bung, fill them, and roll them into the warehouse. If we have an issue with casks, we can do a certain amount of repair work on site, but it tends just to be driving the hoops and maybe mending the odd hole. But on the whole, they come here ready to fill.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about some cask types or some that have just arrived at the distillery, and I couldn't remember what they were.
Murray. M-A-U-R-Y.
And you're not quite sure about the pronunciation. Is that why you said it so quickly?
Maury or Murray.
Okay.
Maury, I'd imagine. And you're going to ask me where they come from, because I do know, actually.
Yeah.
And I seek out some from different. These are fortified wine casks from the Côte de Roussillon region of France, southwest of France. And these are really old. If you saw them, they're dumpy butts and incredibly old. They mature the wine in them for at least 15 years.
Okay.
And I just thought, well, it'd be fun to have a go with these. I haven't a clue how it's going to work.
Amazing.
The really rich, sort of dark color. There was quite a lot of liquid in the cask, which we decided we dumped that out before we fill them, and they're actually filling them in the next day or so. So it'd be interesting over the next 6 months to a year to see how things develop with those.
What does Anthony see will be the biggest changes for Kilchoman as for the brand in the next 5 years?
Well, I think in the last 3 years, the changes have been enormous here at Kilchoman. You know, we're not wanting to stand still. We're wanting to continue to grow the brand, and we've been very fortunate that's been the case over the last 5 or 6 years. We've invested heavily. We want to continue that journey, so we'll continue to see how we go, and we will react to more production or as the sales increase. So the next stage is to put in 2 more washbacks, so we can go to 7 days, 24 hours, so full maximum production, and get up to close to about 640,000 litres if we want to. Yeah. And it gives us that flexibility to either ramp it up or pull back slightly, depending on how sales are going.
Do you regret not making more whiskey in the early days, or was it just simply not an option? So I think you can't regret it because it didn't have the choice.
Well, I think back in those days, people thought I was completely crazy to even build a distillery. Now, you know, the talk of new distilleries is everywhere, and everybody's building new distilleries, so it's not an issue. So when I started the distillery, you know, 100,000 litres seemed to dip my toe in the water to see how that was. I thought that would be enough. As it was, we built a distillery that we could actually produce 250 if we wanted to. So we slowly but surely, yes, now in retrospect, you say, well, you wish you'd produced 400,000 at the beginning. But I think it was very risky when I started the distillery because I was first of the new wave. And I think we needed to be careful. And I'm still very surprised that a lot of the new distilleries have much bigger production than we do, potentially, because I think you need to build the brand before you make all this whiskey, because, you know, 500,000 litres of alcohol yet translates into about 1.4 million bottles equivalent. Yeah. And I think that is a huge volume to be looking to sell of a new brand that you haven't actually built up slowly but surely. So we've had to be very careful. But the one thing that's really stood us in good stead is being able to release our whiskies at a relatively young age, and even more importantly, the consumer has been ready to accept young age single malt as actually something they're worth paying for and looking at.
Okay. And are there any plans to mature Kilchoman in ex-beer casks, or a separate question also asking about virgin oak as well?
Well, virgin oak is something that other distilleries have certainly experimented with, and we haven't as yet, and I think we should have a go at it. I think my only issue with that is because of our sweet floral character of spirit, then you'll get too much wood extraction and it'll go completely over the top quicker. But we're going to give it a go. We will certainly fill a few casks to see. What was the other question?
Ex-beer casks.
I think we should. Again, it's been done and done successfully by a few distilleries, and we'll have to look at that as well.
Okay. And then, is there a cask you'd like to try that the SWA wouldn't allow?
Well, I think, you know...
What about those big... they don't consider the big STRs?
Well, I hope the SWA aren't listening right now, but we actually filled the Calvados cask prior to...
Well, you probably shouldn't...
No, it's absolutely fine to say it now because we can release them as Calvados casks. So I think it's great that the SWA have now relaxed their regulations. I also believe it's hugely important that they've been there to regulate the Scotch whisky industry. When you look at rum or you look at gin, they don't have the same regulation. And so we might complain about the regulation, but it's stood us in very good stead. Everybody knows where they stand. But to relax the rules around what we fill into is tremendous. So now we can fill cognac casks and we can fill Calvados casks and Medscal and tequila casks. And that really does just broaden everybody's horizon in terms of what the characteristics can shine through from these different cask types. So we're going to carry on this experimental cask filling because it's great fun to do.
And for small batches exclusives, for different countries, do you come up with blends that they tend to like more? The US small batches are amazing. So do you create the small batches with a consideration of maybe the palate of the US being different to the palate in, Germany?
No, in all honesty, we look to see what we've got available in the warehouse as something different to add to the sort of core vatting. And then we experiment and see how it works. And then we actually let the distributor choose out of 2 or 3 different small batch vattings. In America, it's worked incredibly well. It's been very popular. And in other markets, maybe not so. But we have a number of different experimental casks that we will look at. And we'll do a vatting with the core vatting part, which is the sort of bourbon and sherry, and then add these other cask types to see how they work. Fortunately, they've worked pretty well, and people have been hugely complimentary about them.
And with the Buffalo Trace barrels, so the bourbon barrels we use, do you empty them before you fill, or do you leave what's in them in the barrel?
No, there tends not to be a huge amount left in them. They need to leave a little bit in there to keep the casks moist as they travel over, because it's going to take a month to 6 weeks to arrive. So you don't want to dry them out, empty them out completely. So in Buffalo Trace, they'll leave 5 or so litres in the cask. And by the time they've arrived, that's been absorbed into the wood. So there's not a lot left.
And we mentioned earlier on that the next potential sort of addition to the core range might be a cask strength.
Yeah.
Bottling. Do you want to talk any more about that? Yeah, and maybe the sort of future releases or additions to the core range in particular, maybe
I better talk to my sales and marketing team.
So there's 3 sides to that really. So your cask strength, and then we talked about the SDR, but then also age statement stuff as well.
Yeah. So I think cask strength to me is the way you should drink whiskey, because you're in charge of how you drink it. Many people like to dilute it a lot. Others don't like to dilute it very much. So cask strength to me is all about straight from the cask with a bit of filtration. So we are going to do a cask strength whiskey, hopefully next year. We haven't decided exactly what that will be, but it will be a cask strength to add to the core expressions. And then the other part of the question was?
SDRs. I know you're filling more SDR.
Yeah, I mean, I think the SDR, the shaved, toasted and recharred cask, which is something that Jim Swan, who was my mentor in terms of getting me on the right track in terms of building distillery, huge amount of experience in maturation. And he came up with this shaved, toasted and recharred, and they've worked exceptionally well. More long-term, I would say. They need 8, 9, 10 years in cask, but we're now laying down a lot of STR casks, so that eventually in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll be able to do a core expression of STR cask mature, because I think it really, really has been one of the successes of our experimental cask releases.
So any more questions, please fire them in. One other question here is, who is your second favourite son after James?
Yeah, very funny, James. You didn't even...
It's a draw for second place.
Yeah, it's an absolute draw. You can't... you're all bloody shit.
Oh, yeah, first swear word, 10 to 5. All right, mark it down.
Watershed. Yes. So, well, anyway, no. Well, I think that sort of wraps that up. But I'm doing a tasting. Obviously, you'll be very interested to join me for that at 7:15, and that's about the experimental cask types that we filled, and we've sent out the packs. But even if you haven't got a pack, join in with something that you've got. It doesn't have to be Kilchoman, and I'll talk you through. My passion being, the cask that we use is definitely the thing that makes the biggest influence on the character of the whiskey that you'll enjoy. So we've got 4 different cask types, not bourbon, not sherry, and it'd be very interesting to see the same spirit and how it changes the character of the whiskey that's been filled into these casks. We talk a lot about all sorts of things that influence the end spirit, in terms of terroir and all that. And I'll be going through all that with you at 7:15. So do join me then.
And before then, that's obviously the main event.
Oh, sorry. There's obviously something going on before that, but it's not that important.
There is. So next up, at 5 is Medscal and Pete are going to be in the bottling hall. And it's quite interesting. They'll see your new box erector.
Yeah, and Michal's just come back from his Caribbean holiday.
He's got a bit of a tan.
He's got a bit of a tan on him. He's moisturised though, so he won't fall to pieces, hopefully.
Anyway, so that will be happening at 5. But if you're just joining for this part of it, please, between now and whenever you want to look at stuff, that it's all on our homepages of our social media. So, go to the links in our bio or the main pages, and you'll see all the videos and all the Q&As. So we hope you will hang around, see us at 5 and then 5:30. Okay, thanks.